This is a series that we host that puts faculty, researchers, and artists from campus in conversation with community members around a shared topic. Before we dive in, I just wanted to let you know about a few other upcoming events in this series. On April 19th, we'll be hosting a conversation on global citizenship. What are the inherent tensions in how we imagine and experience cultures, places, and citizenship? How does our understanding of global citizenship in the United States help us understand our power in the world? How do we balance our responsibilities to local and national communities with our obligations to the world community? And what does this mean for the future of education? Join middle school teacher Alyssa Meggett, University of Iowa College of Education Social Studies, faculty member Jason Harshman, and Grinnell's Caleb Elfenbein as they discuss these important issues. Then the following week, and this is an Obermann pop-up conversation. We've done a few of these as there are topics that sort of call to be addressed in the moment, and we're still working on the exact date and location of this talk. So it's going to be April 24th or 25th. If you sign up for our newsletter and our list, you'll find out about this once everything is confirmed, and it will be on our website. But we're going to have a conversation with definitely faculty from the College of Public Health and Sociology and some others regarding gun control and the limitations on research by federal funding agencies. And so it seems like the time is ripe to have that conversation. Today, however, we turn to Cursive. So I'm thrilled to be joined by these folks, and we just had like a little entry-level dipping our toe in conversation, and it was already more interesting than any of us even realized. So now like woo, yay, now we get to go. So
you guys get to be part of it too.
Yeah, and you all get to be part of it as well. So immediately to my left is Shawn Datchuk, who is an assistant professor in the departments of teaching and learning and special education in the College of Education. And in the middle is Lisa Roberts, who is the assistant director of the Iowa Youth Writing Project. And Lisa is also a poet and a co-founder of a monthly generative writing workshop. And you can often hear her work up in Cedar Rapids at the Hook and some other places. And then on the end is Cheryl Jacobsen, who is a calligrapher and a designer and illustrator in a freelance capacity, and is also an adjunct assistant professor in the UI Center for the Book, where she regularly teaches calligraphy. So the title of today's talk was taken by a wonderful spoken word poem that I got to hear Lisa do early last summer, and I asked her to start us off with that. So if you wouldn't mind, Lisa.
Sure. Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Spoken word tradition. I need to get near you. Okay. Hey, Cursive. What's your history? Your curly story looping all the way from there to here. Not cur, but sieve, straining in reverse my long spaghetti thoughts out and onto the page. You made writing a full body sport. Kinetic thought zapping bicep, stirring forearm, tingling wrist to get letters canoodling. You immersive cursive. War chest? Reverse mortgage. Paying dividends in fingers preserved, time saved. Making mountains? No. Making molehills out of mountains and paper dolls with joined hands across the waters, rising and falling. I was the kid with a grown-up hand, minding the dotted line, green ink of my practice sheets, paving the road to the future. Curvaceous, brave letters, always leaning into the wind, blown beauty. I wanted to take every dangle of your G or Y and wear them in my hair like rubies. You used to mean writing. Do you want me to write or print, we could ask, and people knew what we meant. Now, I'm not one who regrets progress. Don't much miss the home phone, its snaky cord, that short leash and waxy earpiece. I don't mourn the boxy television, those 3 channels, 4 if we were lucky, locking us into some programmer's idea of how our night should go. But I do mourn you, Cursive. Your falling out of schools, your unreadable beauty to those under 20, your morphing into good soldiers who wear straight hats, stand at attention to telegraph their no nonsense as if all writing were a street sign. Best when least human, most machine. The letters our forefathers and foremothers wrote in your dancing arabesque. Soon, mere ciphers to all but a trained cryptographer. Closer to Arabic and the rumba than assembly instructions. Nearer to tiramisu and triple salchow than email. So long, Cursive. We'll survive. A little less beautiful, a little less round.
Thank you so much. Everything should start with a poem, don't you think? It just changes things. So I wanted to start with Cursive. Where did it come from? Like going all the way back. And so Cheryl, in addition to writing beautifully, has also studied the history of writing. And so if you could start us out.
I will. Is this loud enough? I am on the
You can pull it
Okay.
close, too.
Okay, or not. So one of the things I get to do at the university is teach a class called History of Western Letter Forms. And I've never been a really great history person, but my love of writing and calligraphy has really sort of shown me how to love that and to get into history in a different way. It's kind of led me in a secret back door. This class, although we talk about writing going back as far as we know, my class really starts about 180 with Roman letters. And at that point, you have letters that are written on the wall with a brush, and then they're carved. And then you have the fast writing that's loopy, and that the other people write, and it's fast, and you don't have to get out your chisel and your brush and take forever to write a thing on the wall. So back then, it was like either a really sort solid form, kind of like we have now in type, and then a more personal form. As time went on, that sort of solid form came off the walls and ended up on either papyrus or vellum or actually paper. But this was still before printing, so you needed writing that was really clear. And not a lot of people knew how to do it. So you have the book hands. And so a lot of the book hands that you see in old manuscripts, whether it's black letter or it's Carolingian, and we could go into all of those, which is what we do in my class. But these forms are all essentially the type of their time. So they sort of exist in one world. And then again, for the people who could write, and not everybody could, there's the fast, speedy, get-it-done stuff, which harder to read, more personality, and you can really get a lot of stuff done with it. So we take things up to about when printing starts, because then you have a whole new form of perfect, immovable letters like you did in the Roman times. Then handwriting goes through a whole bunch of changes depending on what kind of tool you use, depending on what you're writing on, and things as it evolves from a broad edge pen or a quill to a steel pen to a pointed pen to a ballpoint pen really changes the way we do all that fast writing. So now we're in a point where the fast writing isn't fast enough to keep up with our normal life anymore. So it's not like the quick stuff. So I guess that's where I can just stop and pass it on. Really early colonial handwriting was done with a pointed either quill or nib. And I could go on, but that's probably enough, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we are going to segue from that into then the evolution of the
Yes.
teaching of handwriting.
Okay, segue.
Yeah, segue.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
That was smooth, right?
It's gonna be me. First, I'd just like to say, what a lovely poem. Yeah, thank you so much. And then I guess jumping several decades at least, then you would start to get more formalized handwriting instruction within schools. And what we saw, at least in the United States, was a focus on printed text, printed handwriting, but then also a cursive type of handwriting. And there's different types of styles within cursive, but this is just sort of be more what you would see in a signature of a pen when you go to sort of sign a check. And so that type of cursive was emphasized within K-12 schools within the United States. What we've seen recently, at least in terms of legislation that's been passed and also academic standards, so across the 50 states in the United States, there's a set of academic standards that set forth for, let's just look at elementary grades. The majority of states follow the same set of academic standards, the Common Core, and then some states have their own individual standards. What's happened with those standards is that handwriting has had a place within those standards at kindergarten and first grade. So where it calls for students to be able to print upper and lowercase text. Completely absent from those standards is cursive. So what that means is that when it comes to directions from federal guidelines and also state guidelines, local schools get some guidance on having a benchmark for printed text, so upper and lowercase. There's no guidance for cursive writing. So what that has meant is that there are a handful of states, such as Tennessee and Louisiana, to where there are state guidelines for cursive writing, but it's really just up to states. And what you actually, if you sort of look at teacher reports on how often they spend teaching handwriting or teaching cursive, at elementary grades, writing in total, so spelling, grammar and usage, capitalization, punctuation, story writing, including handwriting, on average across the United States is about 15 minutes per day only. So what that means is handwriting, printed text, but then also connected text tends to be, unfortunately, just a small part of the school day, at least that is explicitly taught. It's still predominantly the form that students are asked to document their knowledge, so in notes or short responses, but then also share understanding. So even though, like Jen has her computer up here with notes, I have my smartphone here. There's definitely been an embrace of technology. However, the vast majority of the student school day is still pen to paper, pencil to paper. That's how they show their understanding.
Yay. Except they're not
And-
getting the instruction.
I know, right.
Yeah.
And what about the benefits to maybe cursive in particular, and then also handwriting in terms of learning and mental development? We were talking before, there seems to be some divided research about this. But could you speak to that a little, Shawn?
Yeah, sure. So if you look at academic development of students, so again, if we could just stick with elementary, but this would apply also for middle and high schoolers, and then some research through college, is that your handwriting speed and legibility tends to reach a tipping point. Many of you have probably been to the doctor, hopefully not recently, but you've been to the doctor where you've gotten a doctor's note and you couldn't tell what they wrote. So there's definitely, you don't need to have perfect handwriting in order to be successful academically, but there tends to be a tipping point to where you need to have enough legibility and enough speed in order to unlock other aspects of writing. And if the vast majority of how you show teachers and others your understanding in schools is through handwriting, that also unlocks teachers giving you feedback, students able to talk with you about what you wrote, your peers. So besides just the practical benefits, there appears to be, if you look at brain activation research, that there are specific parts of not only visual recognition, but also parts of the brain that are associated with physical movement that is activated when students are asked to handwrite versus when they're asked to type. We're not quite sure why those activation points are distinct, but that tends to be a pattern for elementary, but then also older learners. And then there's some conflicting evidence in terms of if there are differential benefits to having a student handwrite print versus handwrite cursive. There's been some studies that suggest that there's even more regions of the brain that are activated for younger students when they're engaged in cursive writing versus printed, but then in other samples that hasn't been the case.
I thought I'd fast forward to some recent research. You may have heard about it. It was in spring of 2014. There was some research from Princeton and UCLA profs. And so they're thinking about college students and the difference. This got some play on NPR, but I went back and looked at the study, Mueller and Oppenheimer. And they did extensive study of students either keyboarding their notes from a lecture and handwriting their notes from a lecture. Remember that? And it was fascinating because apparently the results were, as you would imagine, the typing students took many more notes. There was absolutely no doubt, but they were verbatim notes. And so they weren't processing the information. And so the researchers found they didn't expect this, but what they found was that comprehension and retention were aided by handwritten notes because of the process of listening, assimilating, organizing, connecting ideas in order to decide what is the most important information and how is it related. It was just fascinating. So very close after the lecture, they found that comprehension and retention were better, and then even later as well, when students had an opportunity to look back over their verbatim notes, they still did better if they'd taken handwritten notes. Fascinating.
And I wrote a book a few years ago about visual journals, and a lot of the people I interviewed in that book shared that the reason that they kept this journal was because exactly that they had a very different relationship to the information when they were both drawing and writing it, as opposed to if they'd gone home and typed it out. So it lived in them in a really, really different way, which was cool. I wanted to get some reflections on actually being in the classroom, and I wanted to start with you, Cheryl, and the experience of teaching students calligraphy right now.
Right now. It's really interesting depending on what we do. You know, a lot of the forms I teach now, I wouldn't really consider cursive. I teach a lot of sort of historical book hands. We do some cursive too, but just getting kids to slow down enough to really look and really think and think about sort of the rhythm of writing and getting used to that, and even getting used to holding, especially a broad edge pen. If you're holding a pencil or a ballpoint pen, it doesn't really matter how your pen hits the paper. But with a broad edge pen, it's got a square tip, and so you have to make sure that thing hits in the right place. And then you have to learn how to hold it in a certain angle to get the sort of thicks and thins. I don't teach too much just regular handwriting. But man, just even getting people to hold a pen so that you can be an effective calligrapher. I mean, even my kids hold really weird, you know, like this. And I used to have to pay them and say, could you write like a calligrapher, please, please? And they don't. I mean, they write all day at school and they don't write like a calligrapher. So, but getting my people to slow down, I usually have to say, you know, this is so hard. And the thing is, writing really nicely just takes a long time. And it takes a long time to learn. It takes a long time to get so that it's both legible and attractive. Oh, I just lost my train of thought. Anyway, it really takes, people really come to my class thinking, oh yeah, she's going to show us how to write pretty letters, and she's going to give us a pen, and we'll write really great. But it takes a long time. And really, people have to take my class, pay money, get credit, to be forced to practice enough to really start to be good. And I think that's one of the things back when they actually taught penmanship in school. They would sit for, I would have a whole class of just writing and practicing Palmer ovals over and over and connecting things and doing that. And until you do that kind of almost mindless work so that you're really connecting what the words are with this movement that you're doing, I don't see how people can do, I mean, there's just no time in school, like you say. I've seen it with my kids, and they barely, they write. And I think it's really important. I'm not so sure how important cursive is. I mean, I have my own personal cursive, which I do with a broad edge pen, a Gothic cursive, and it's very small, so you can write it really quickly, and it's very attractive. But just writing, I hope we don't lose kids writing. That would be my big scary thing.
Lisa, you were reflecting on what you're seeing in schools via the Iowa Youth Writing Project.
Yeah, we have workshops right now in about 20 elementary schools around the area. And we definitely try to reach out to schools that could really use some literacy enrichment because there are low literacy levels or there's high levels of economic need in the student population. And I've seen it. I love the kids at Mark Twain. And it's painful to watch how some of them, you can see they resist writing. It's not because they don't want to make stories. It's not because they don't like the sounds of words. It's because some of them physically are not adept at making marks on the page. And these are kids in 3rd grade and 4th grade, and it's heartbreaking. And we just started a new workshop at Lincoln, the richest school in town. And there's no problem there. 2nd graders are off to the races. They fill their whole page. So I think that there's definitely a socioeconomic divide in terms of skills, perhaps because of the need for reinforcement in school and at home and with literacy enrichment. What happens in the summers? There's something, we call it the summer slide, right? Some kids get literacy enrichment, some kids don't. That's why all our summer camps are free from the IYWP. We want all those kids. But I'm concerned as well about the move to keyboarding for all children in terms of this economic need. Not everywhere has Wi-Fi. There are white rural areas that don't get Wi-Fi. And then also, do all elementary children have access to computers? It's our goal, but it's not happening. So if they're not getting the instruction in handwriting, and maybe some of these kids are missing out on keyboarding, they have lost writing as a personal and a professional and a career tool. It frightens me.
So I want each of you to, if you have questions for each other, to consider them, but then if there are questions in the audience, please feel free, and we have a microphone. Jenna will bring a microphone around if you have a question. Yes?
Well, I'm probably the oldest person in this room, and I certainly had penmanship as a major subject in all through elementary school. But I'm left-handed, and penmanship was a very painful thing for me in elementary school because in my first 3 years, I twisted my hand around and I could sort of do it. And then the 4th grade teacher said, no, you have to hold it properly. And from then on, it deteriorated badly. But it was a subject you were given grades on, so it wasn't just incidental. And I'm asking perhaps Cheryl, Can you teach calligraphy to left-handed people?
Absolutely. I do it all the time, and I don't make you do the hooky thing. There are various ways.
Yeah.
Usually, it's just positioning of the paper. And usually, if I can get it so the top of the paper is here, so that you're writing like this, you can both see what you're doing, and you don't run your hand through it. I've had some people that have even done pointed pen lettering where, and this was a sports person, so it wasn't even a person that was used to writing all the time, where she was doing engraver's script with the top of the paper here and writing like this. And once she sort of got her head literally around that, just a different perspective, she wrote beautifully. So I think it's just not forcing it in a weird way.
There's one other thing that I'd like to mention. Does anyone remember fountain pens? We were not allowed to use fountain pens in elementary school until I think maybe 7th grade. But we used pens with nibs. We had to buy new nibs all the time because they splayed out. And ink, and we had ink wells in our desks. And I'll tell you, if you're left-handed, as you're writing from left to right, you are smudging your writing almost inevitably. That's all I wanted to. I'm done. Thank you.
So I've had very bad handwriting for, is this on? Hear me? Okay. For most of my life, and it affected my workflow. I recently, about 3 years ago now, changed from American Standard Cursive to Cursive Italic. Basically, I like fountain pens, and I was on a vendor site, and they recommended a book on handwriting, and I got it. And it was within about 3 weeks that 3 weeks of practice, that I was able to, now I write legibly. I actually enjoy writing, just sit there and so forth. But this particular system they pushed had one aspect that they wanted to emphasize was that it's close to print. It's basically how, our print character is connected as opposed to learning two separate alphabets like you do, or not completely separate, but American Standard Cursive and print are different. The B is not the same. Capital S isn't the same. There's all sorts of weird characters that are separate when you do American Standard Cursive. And then the poem seemed to be quite enamored with the loops, but the loops are what made everything that I wrote down look like the same character.
I'm sorry.
So it's like
I love the
so I'm sitting here looking back at my notes, and so I actually have a notebook here that I've been keeping lecture notes in. So it has about 4 years of notes in it. And I go back and I can see that I actually was not using cursive. I was just trying to print very, very quickly, and it is mangled. And then if I flip to the transition, you'll literally see within the very, very next thing I'm writing is legible. Like you could read it. We could both read what I write recently. Neither one of us could read what I used to write, even with printing. And to the degree that you want to sort of try to push back against this loss of cursive, to what degree is the particular specific system that you want to teach matter? Because some are better than others, right?
I totally agree with that. I was one of my questions when we got together for our pre-thing was, what are we really talking about with cursive? Because there's really so many ways. When you write when you write in your italic, are you using a broad edge pen or just a regular one? Just a straight fountain pen, yeah. Yeah. I tend to write very italic too, and I think that makes actually more sense. And I think it's even easier to read. I mean, even for kids, if you're doing, and even if it's a connected italic, it seems to make more sense. Yeah, definitely, yeah.
So it's still very quick. It's quicker than the previous.
Right, oh, totally, yeah, I think I do that too.
Shawn, what are the various hands that are being taught right now? I mean, I think it changed even when my kids
Oh,
were in
yeah,
school, it
me
changed.
too.
Like, do you know what are and is it different around the country, or what are kind of the leading?
Right. So the vast majority of students, if they receive explicit handwriting instruction, will just be straight standard font print, and that's it. So the vast majority of students are not getting cursive instruction. So I'm not quite sure when it is being taught what the differences are across that. I think there is an important piece that I'd like to add in here real quick is that it's unfortunately, to the gentleman's point, is that there are differences in the systems on how the texts appear, whether it's connected, like example would be the S looks very different. Unfortunately, what the research shows is that if you teach a student, let's say, standard print, and the skills that are instructed in that standard print won't transfer easily to, let's say, their cursive writing. Or if it's taught in cursive, it won't transfer easy to the print. And then also it won't transfer easy to typing. So what that means is that if a student learns something where it's through keyboarding, let's say grammar and usage skill, they won't automatically transfer that to their handwritten text.
Really?
So yeah,
Wow.
so what that means is that it really is incumbent upon us as community members and then teachers to be aware of that. I don't think handwriting is going to die. I think it's going to morph and change. Definitely it has. But if we envision our children, like I have a 1-year-old, I envision him needing to be flexible in terms of handwritten print, perhaps cursive, and then also typed. What that means is that he'll need experiences doing all 3 of those within his school, because if he just has practice just in one predominant form, it won't transfer easy for him, unfortunately. But
I think the argument, though, that the system I have is the transition for the cursive vitality between the print and the cursive part, the connected part, was actually much more natural. Many of the characters are drawn essentially the same, with you just don't lift your pen, and it goes naturally to the next one.
And that sounds very much like, and again, so my kids are in high school now, but when they were in elementary school, I remember that was the shift to learn this connected, kind of more italic and
Right.
and not cursive per se.
Yeah, I'm not sure if my kids ever learned
Yeah.
cursive.
Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah.
Hi, I'm probably the only one from India here. So I was born and raised in India, and we started using fountain pens in 5th grade. So until then, until 4th grade, we were to use pencils. And 5th grade, I remember we had every day we had 1 hour handwriting class, a period. And our teachers insisted that we use only fountain pens, and there was, like how you mentioned, we were told to hold the pen in a certain form and not put the cap on top of the pen as well. And every year, as a class outgoing, you would be awarded like the best handwriting. So I was very proud at the time to receive one. I used to love cursive handwriting, but unfortunately, when I went into medical school in India, you're not given handouts or PowerPoints. So it's textbook reading primarily, and then you're going to be, at least the time when I went to medical school, the teachers would teach. So you are always in a rush to take notes. And that, my handwriting from beautiful has become illegible now. Okay, and we really had to take notes in a rush, and from fountain pen, it had to go to a ballpoint pen. And now I'm back to a fountain pen after much research. So the other thing I would like to add is, so when we moved cities, I used to receive letters from my friends, classmates, like 7th, 8th, 9th grades. I used to recognize who the letter was from without just looking at the handwriting. And I thought that was such a beautiful personal touch. And even my dad used to write to me. That's become obsolete now, do you think there's an emphasis, or is there any impact with research? I don't know that, handwriting adds certain sort of, it elevates your, emotions, or, it's a personal touch. Is there something to it? I think something special about it. And are there any workshops, to get back to what
Oh, yes, definitely, workshops, yes, all the time. And I would just say, for the whole, you were talking about the emotion. Writing for me and calligraphy is just the emotion of your hand going, it's literally the traces of motion on the paper. And you really do see everybody's different styles. Even with my students, even if I start them with a certain, my teaching alphabet, their writing becomes very much theirs, even if it's like Colleen has a really great italic handwriting. And it's different than mine, and that's what I hope for all my students, is to sort of find their own. But the whole idea of, if writing is capturing the emotion, and I sort of see writing as more drawing than just putting letters on the paper.
I'm sure that many of us have had the experience where we've come across a handwritten letter from a family member who's died. And is there anything else like that? To know that their hand was on that page and they touched it, and it's as if you're once removed, but it's almost as if you're touching their hand still. And so there's clearly an emotional element to it. And I mean, what is art in a way but human marks, the mark of, beautiful oil paintings where we see the brush strokes. It's my favorite kind of art, where you can see the mark of the maker and you know that they were there. And we're losing that, right? I mean, there's no, I'm not a handwriting Luddite, right? I'm not going to crash keyboards and try to go back. There's no turning back, but we have to preserve both.
About emotion in handwriting. When I was in high school, I had a teacher who was claimed that he could tell about you by your handwriting, and which there are some ways to do that, but I really hated this teacher. And so I made it my goal to have as many different handwritings as physically
That's so
possible.
funny.
So every single thing that I would turn in would have a different handwriting. And so I feel like maybe that in itself told something about me.
Diagnosed as multiple personality disorder.
Yeah, it kind of backfired. But I just remember that I'd spent so long looking on the internet and trying to find I could do 3 different fonts of cursive, and I could do print to do all caps, and do all that. And then the other thing I wanted to comment about was I studied abroad in Japan for a year, and while I studied there, we had a calligraphy class. And of course, in China and Japan and probably Korea, I don't know, calligraphy is incredibly important and an incredible art because, they make those massive, pictograms, that are their characters. And it just kind of reminded me what she was talking about, of how we had the fountain pens. And however, in Japan, to do a calligraphy or to do calligraphy, you are not allowed to be left-handed. If you are left-handed, you have to do it with your right hand or not do it at all. Mm-hmm. And so I had a friend who went with me to Japan, and she couldn't take calligraphy because there's no way she could do anything with her right hand. But it's just really interesting how those things will affect that. That's all.
And while you're passing the mic, I just want to say my brother lives in Japan and writes and performs there. And I've had jobs where people wanted me to write in Japanese, thinking, oh yeah, she's a calligrapher, that's a calligrapher. And I'll make these marks and I'll show it to my brother to see if he goes, well, it's right, but it looks like an American did it.
I was wondering if handwriting could be taught or learned separate from teaching or learning language skills. I mean, English, or whatever.
Right.
You write, I don't know how to call it, but are they two distinct things, or do you have to connect them to really be able to do both?
Go.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I can write Hebrew. I don't know how to read it. And I'm now writing Anglo-Saxon, and I don't know how to read it. So there you go. I don't know. Go. You can copy, but
have to have something to say to be able to
Right.
write? No?
I don't think so.
That's a fabulous question. So I think that in some instances it can be easy to think of handwriting as just a strictly motor act. So there's just fine motor involved. However, speaking to the personal nature of handwriting, there's actually so many systems and processes involved in it. So one would be the fine motor movement, so dexterity in your fingers, gross motor movement for positioning your body and your hand. Also, you need vision in order to see what you're writing. You also need visual motor feedback, so you can tell when you approach a line or how the size and shape of letters. But then you also need to have some working memory and long-term memory resources to pull letter formation from. So that goes into what types of fonts we're exposed to, whether it's cursive font or how A's are shaped or italicized A's. So when we actually think about all those systems in play, we've been developing our handwriting for years, and it's continually shaped based off of the types of letters that we're exposed to, perhaps in a class. So what that means is the letters, so the short answer of it would be, I would say it'd be no, you can't divorce it from language. Two would be that when you actually think about the handwritten letters that you get from people or notes, I think the reason why it's so meaningful is that the history of all those processes are coming into play. So, so I'm not incredibly old, but now I'm old enough to where when I write my wife a note, let's say on her birthday, that's an accumulation of a history that she hasn't even seen, just from when we've been together, that I'm bringing to the table that you can't easily do with any other skill. So anything else that I show from her, it's you know, could just be happening right there in the moment. But my handwriting has been evolving since I initially started to pick up a pen or pencil. So that was a long-winded way of saying is that you can't divorce it from language.
I mean, I think handwriting is just a fundamental aspect of your personal autonomy and expression, and that it's very critical for how you express yourself and give you the competence to communicate in a wide variety of contexts that gets limited when you can only print and just do that. I find it hard to accept the conclusion that there's not sufficient time in a 12-year curriculum to teach handwriting. That's BS as far as I'm concerned. There is a new method I've come across, a Kickstarter campaign called Cursive Logic, cursivelogic.com. A woman, Linda Shrewsbury, developed this. She's able to teach apparently not only children but adult learners in just a matter of weeks the basics of cursive writing, and she's had great success with that. So I think there is room to insinuate that to get to a level of competence. I think it has also to do with observation, and it develops your artistic skills and ability for pattern recognition and to interpret wide variety of things in your environment. These are skills that are necessary. I mean, you ought to be able, even if you're not an artist, to document a piece of architecture or a bird or something that you are retaining. Yeah, you can take a picture, but that's not a synthesis and absorption. It's just, you know it's there on the disk, but that's not something you've absolutely interpreted or synthesized into your own knowledge base. And so you build up this mass of electronic information that you'll never go back to. And so in the future, you know, they're not going to be putting on floppy disks and CD drives and all the other obsolete formats to look at. There'll be nothing there. There'll be huge lacuna in people's personal histories because they're not having a sufficient means to archive and preserve this information in digital form. Whereas, and also my last comment would be that you don't value what you can't understand. And so to me, it's kind of a national embarrassment if you cannot read a foundation document like the Declaration of Independence, or you cannot read your own grandparents' letters, okay? What are you going to, how do you value those when it may as well be in a foreign language? Basically, it is in a foreign language. And so I think we have the time and the resources to teach these things. I mean, I do not want to propose going back to these prescriptive methods that were very punitive, as you mentioned. I mean, that is not sound pedagogy. That's not what I'm suggesting. But there still is a happy medium in there where you can teach a means for communication that's comprehensible to people and flexible, and yet is done efficiently and gives you a skill set that will help you improve your motor skills and all these other aspects. I mean, I just saw a UK study, for example, where they found that children didn't even have the strength to hold pencils. I mean, they couldn't even begin the handwriting exercises. They just couldn't physically handle it. I mean, I think it's akin to what you had mentioned. And my last thing is a shout out to Cheryl, who's got a very nice piece of calligraphy in the library on vellum, illuminated manuscript, which was blown up even greater upstairs, well, more than life size. It'd be a triple elephant folio. Wow. The same thing reproduced. So check that out if you haven't seen it
And
already.
on the back, there's an iPad that lights up. So it's an old book inside of a new book.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you. I was just going to ask one question, then we'll pass it to you. Shawn, let me back up, I'm sorry. One thing that we were talking about earlier that I read, which is actually the woman who's the director of the National Handwriting Competition, so this exists, so said she was actually a fan of teaching kids to print, but then teaching them how to read cursive. And so That was sort of, I hadn't thought of that as an option. I was just wondering, Shawn, if Lisa's comment about the socioeconomics of handwriting, is that something that you've seen in your research at all? And then we can float over there.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's called the broadband gap. Is that there's unfortunately broadband and high-speed internet. You may have it in your home. I do. I love it. I mainly use it to watch Netflix and things like that. But that really matters for schools because if you want access to word processing software, things like Google Docs, and sort of the ability to transfer your typed knowledge to teachers or peers, that really matters. So schools, a lot of schools lack access to that, and it has to do with local property taxes and then how it funds local schools. But then also, lots of schools do not have the technology means to do a one-to-one correspondence. And we see that playing out in national data. So technology is increasing overall, technology use at the elementary, middle, and high school grades. However, if you actually look at teacher survey reports on how often they integrate technology, it tends to be roughly between 20 and 40%, depending on the grade levels, to where they use some piece of technology on a weekly or more than weekly basis. That's still the vast majority of the time is spent with pen and paper. And so when we sort of think about whether or not schools have access to keyboarding, and then also the potential decline of our teaching of handwriting, that is going to have a direct impact on your ability to have access to sort of technology to use keyboarding. But
Is this strictly an American problem, or is this a worldwide problem?
worldwide. I can speak most cogently about the U.S. schools, but the ability to keep up with technology is really a difficulty for lots of schools across, particularly in Asian communities and some in Europe. But yeah, unfortunately, it's playing out.
And we have a question over here, too.
Just a quick question. I'm thinking about the other end of the life course and the fact that so many of us in our 40s and 50s our writing gets worse and worse. And so, and that should be before motor skills or any kind of an issue. What happens?
So and then we'll go up to, in the blue sweatshirt, and then we'll come over here.
Our writing gets worse, or we type.
Thank you. I appreciate you doing this particular session. It's really fun. As a teacher, I am encouraged to save paper. And my students do not bring paper to class. So if I want them to write anything, then I need to bring the paper or run down to the office or something to get it. But I was wondering if any of you have any, or even from the audience, have suggestions for things to do in the classroom on just any kind of classroom that would encourage students to actually write. Like today, we had some questions, and I actually had them write down the answers on a piece of paper, which they didn't have, but I had paper for them. So suggestions for that?
On the Iowa Youth Writing Project website, we have a resource button, and we have a wiki. And so this is a bunch of our creative writing prompts that we use in our workshops. So over the years, we've tried to put some of them online. So just fun things like you're in an elevator and there are 100 buttons and you get to choose which button you push, but each one corresponds to a year of your life. And when you push the button for 23, the door will open and you will be in the 23 third year of your life. What do you see? That's just one example of the kind of creative writing prompt. They could go back in time. They could go to being 89. But we have a lot of different writing prompts for children of all ages on our website. It's just iywp.org. But we could talk afterwards if you're interested.
I just had a really quick comment. I just wanted to address the one question by over here in terms of what might be the reasons why handwriting quality potentially decreases across age. If you think about all those processes that come into play, even if fine motor starts to dip a little bit, or if you start to maybe have some memory issues, unfortunately, just one of those wobbly pieces can actually throw off handwriting in general. So if you have more difficulty recalling letters, let's say, that's going to impact. If you start to have more difficulty with fine motor movement, even if you have, even if the letter shapes can be vividly recalled, you're going to have difficulty translating it. So that, I think that just speaks to the fact that handwriting is more than just a motor process. You actually need all these processes sort of firing on all cylinders. But I'm sorry.
We have questions over here.
Well, it's just a quick follow-up on that very point. I think technology itself hinders your skills. I'm having used computers for 30 years. You've got repetitive stress, and that hinders your handwriting abilities, I think. That technology itself is hurting that.
We don't have time to address all the things I'd like to comment on, but I have students from the last 40 years. I know which one labeled which envelope because they all have their own style. But of course, I work in an archive, so I'm concerned about what's going to happen to all the archives around the world that are full of documents that are going to be very, very challenging, or as someone said, you have to be a code breaker to look at it. But I also want someone to address the whole idea of spelling and other language skills, grammar, that are being dropped by the wayside, because I'm witnessing among college students handwriting that looks like someone in the first grade when I was in school. The letters aren't, I can't even interpret it. And then they're substituting words which are nothing like the way the word should be spelled, or they're relying on spell checks. How do we integrate the idea that language, as he brought up, has to be brought along with this? Because in terms of exercise science or motor skills, it's all about practice, and getting fast and facile is all about doing it a lot and repetitively. And if we're not allowing time for students to do that and plug into their intellectual skills as creative people or as just good language users, how do we address that?
Somebody else? Shawn? Shawn?
No, it's, I definitely hear you. It's, there's the aspect of fluency with all these skills and components. I cannot express enough how valuable that is. We tend to think of writing as occurring across these composite areas. One would be transcription. So that would be handwriting, spelling, and keyboarding. At the top of the triangle would be text generation, so the ability to put together multiple words within a framework of language that makes sense, that follows some form of syntax or semantics, so it follows some grammar and usage rules. It also makes sense connected together. And students tend to need to be able to develop those two areas with some fluency in order to unlock what we want them to, which would be writing for meaning, which would be sort of the organization, sort of the juicy bits on how to, the fabulous poem that we saw. In order to do that, to focus on those other areas, students can't be having to expend a lot of cognitive and behavioral energy with these other parts to where they need to be fluent.
Exactly.
So unfortunately, if you look across national data, it's we just aren't, there isn't a sufficient enough focus in order to help students develop that fluency. I mean, there's obviously, I'm not trying to say every student's a poor writer, but it's enough that that students need help with these sort of what we consider foundational skills, to where I'm hopeful that there's going to be a greater call of attention to that across the K-12 schools. But
Okay, Shawn, one last question. I have a 17-month-old. So going forward, just like what you said, you want to teach your son cursive and print as well. So how do you do the switch? Like when I learned cursive, or when I was taught cursive, it is with the intent that I continue writing like that. When I write, it's automatically and natural that I'm going to write cursive. So how do you tell a child to differentiate? You're not supposed to write cursive in school, but write like in the print form. Should that be taught at a later age when they have that understanding, like 5th grade or 6th grade, or how will they understand the switch? At school they're taught print. At home I'm just teaching him just to learn cursive. But then the child might get confused, right?
right.
In real world, like that's not expected of you. If going forward, if all the states are going to enforce that, do you have any suggestions?
It's if you look at research-based recommendations on when handwriting instruction should occur, what's sort of the optimal time to where you can really catch a kid, so to speak, in terms of that this handwriting instruction is going to latch on. If your 17-month-old, congratulations by the way, if your 17-month-old is getting reading instruction, the sort of biggest bang for the buck that you can do with that is actually sort of just the printed text. So if they learn the letter sound that you have them also write that printed or a. And if you stick with that the first couple years of their life, that tends to have a solid basis for their spelling. And the recommendation is that after that, if you transition into cursive in those sort of mid-elementary, later elementary grades, that sets the student up really well to be flexible or multimodal in terms of what type of handwriting is produced. So if you follow that recommendation, that seems to play out pretty well.
Thank you.
We may underestimate children's abilities to code switch as well, or maybe script switch, right? So they do it with languages, they do it,
Trying to be bilingual, but
there you go, both, it will happen.
Any other questions?
Going off what you said, my mom taught me cursive when I was very young, and I'm 20 now, and I was one of the last grades that they actually taught cursive in school, and they taught it to me in 3rd grade. However, my mom had taught me throughout a little bit before that, and I don't remember having too much problem differentiating it, because she taught me even before kindergarten, kind of the basics. But when I learned it in grade school in 3rd grade, after I had formally learned it, my mom had me do everything at home in cursive. So everything, all the letters I wrote my parents or grandparents, I always did in cursive, and everything at home I did always had to be cursive. And so I think that helped me, because I can, although I don't really write in sort of a hybrid, I can still write in cursive to this day. And my mom homeschooled me for 2 years, and so everything I did had to be in cursive too. So, but I could still, differentiate. So, yeah, I don't know.
I didn't want that hour to pass without mentioning a really beautiful project that's going on through Nikki Neems at RSVP. And it's called Response. I believe it's handwriting and poetry. And she's in the 3rd stage now. But essentially, she is herself a poet and a small business owner of a paper shop, a handwriting shop in town. And she has reached out to some of the most accomplished poets of our time and asked them to send a passage from one of their poems in their handwriting. And then she has created letterpress cards that capture that handwriting. So you might want to check that out at RSVP. And there's a beautiful, very short article about it in the Iowa Review. So if you were to just sort of Google Nikki Neems and handwriting project, it will come up.
Do you have time for another comment?
Yeah,
No.
I think we could do 2.
She works there.
We have a flyer on the back table, and so would you mind if people could just look at them? We'll just put them on the back table, so don't take them. Just look at them.
Yeah.
I just wanted to address something to the fact that our handwriting deteriorates as we get older, and mine certainly has, so that the only thing I would write by hand apart from addressing envelopes are condolence letters. I will not do that on the computer. But I have a daughter who's in her 60s and who spent her, when she was 8 years old, spent a year in school in Germany. She came out of that experience with a beautiful, very small, very exact handwriting, which she has maintained to this day. Wow. How do you explain something like that?
Well, I guess partially I'm interested too in the difference of the hands taught in different countries, and that's always so intriguing, to have a pen pal when you're a kid from a different country and their handwriting looks so different. So.
Practice makes perfect.
I was curious if you have any information or books that cover the relationship between handwriting and social interaction, creativity, thinking in general. It seems like it serves a centralized government to get rid of handwriting and make everything digitalized. It affords a certain anonymity, and it puts much less emphasis on the personality. But do you have any information on studies that might be done?
Geez,
or even books?
Yeah, I can't think of a book offhand that does that. I can think of several sort of more academic articles that make the argument for the power of, I guess, democracy behind handwriting. But I can't think of a book off the top of my head, fortunately.
Yeah, and I think there have been some artist projects as well that get at that exact topic of the power of democracy and the handwriting, so. Well, I think we'll close it here. If you have personal questions, you can come up, and hopefully we'll see some of you in April at those other two conversations.